So at the end of the day, I present on what I believe to be the most effective communication device in the world, which is storytelling. And it's my belief that people make a decision based on emotion first, and then they support the decision with the analysis. It's not the other way around. Oftentimes people don't think about stories in a business setting. It's more, I read a book, I go to a movie, I tell a story to my children. But the fact is that when you deal in complex products, particularly those that are centered in the future, that require imagination, a story is the easiest way to help a person make an emotional connection to whatever the problem is that they're trying to solve. It takes a complex solution and reduces it to something that resonates emotionally. It particularly is important to people who are in a persuasive profession. So I believe that stories are an integral part of success, both in selling, in leadership, in business communications. I've worked in financial services for many years, and I've certainly told stories to clients, but I also have a hobby of writing both historical fiction and nonfiction. I currently have 17 books that have been published commercially, done very well, and all of those are based on the success of my storytelling. My guess is that all of you tell stories. In fact, if we were to follow you around with a camera to your client interviews, I suspect that there's a limited set of stories that come out nearly all the time. So if you're going to write a good book, at the end of every chapter, you're going to resolve some problem that's in part of that chapter. That's why it's a chapter. You've dealt with something. And then you have to put a hook for the next chapter. Stories work in movies, stories work in books, that's pretty well known. But what about in the business world? Is the story relevant to what you're doing? It does no good to tell a story that isn't connected to the outcome you want to have happen. Is that Ford Motor Company built a cute little car called a Pinto. But people started to die in the Ford Pintos. If they were ever hit from behind, the placement of the gas tank was such that the gas would explode up into the passenger compartment and it would burn the occupant. So Jerry Spence decides to represent one of the men who was burned and still alive. Well, what Jerry Spence did is he moved in with the man. He figured out what it took for this man to simply make it through a day. He talked about how in the morning they had to have a lift installed that could help pull his weight out of the bed because his muscles were so destroyed by the fire that they couldn't lift him. And then he talked about what it was like to take him into the shower. And it's hard not to be emotional because he described the incredible pain of drops of water hitting his skin. And then because of discovery, he pulled out a memo that said, Ford Motor Company, before they sold the first car, knew that this was a problem that existed. The cost of fixing it was $11 per car. So they elected not to fix the problem. Well, the jury was so outraged by this that Ford would make it that they awarded $137 million in punitive damages. Far exceeded the largest liability settlement ever held. By the way, it changed the design of cars from that point forward, so it may be that your life was saved by what? The story that Jerry Spence was able to tell that jury so that they finally took action that was severe enough to cause behavior to change.
Jerry's awesome. I love to hear Jerry. He takes the most complex ideas and makes them easily understood. But beyond that, Jerry is a wealth of knowledge.
The main thing that I took away from the presentation is that a story will help to communicate any principle in any industry, really.
I love the fact that everyone has a story, and that if they can distill that information down into understandable concepts, draw people in, and then let them draw their own conclusions. And that's what Jerry does so well.
I think the people who attend my sessions, whether it be a main stage, whether it be a workshop, are going to come out having had a good experience. They will have found the time interesting for themselves. They will begin to think, do I use stories? And of course they do. And how well do I use those stories? As a result of attending the session, they will begin to perfect their stories. They'll begin to see where they can substitute a story for text, where they can substitute a story for an illustration in order to help the client. The ones who resonate best with the crowds are going to be the ones who tell the best stories. why not take the skill that your very best producers have and extend that to your more, I don't want to say average, but to your producers who are not achieving at the same level. Give them the insights that they need to become effective in their human interactions. I believe that this session can help you do that, and we have experience that it does.